Okay, very exciting topic
All right.
and very appropriate time too. Um, Daniela, you and I have known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
We've worked together in the past too. But just for the audience, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. And before I start about myself and what we do, I want to thank the Hedera ecosystem, the Hedera Foundation. We'll talk about the contribution that Hedera has done in code, but also in just the support of this ecosystem and the growth of the ecosystem. So a big thank you to everyone who organized this event. For those of you who might not know, and Shyam knows this because he's been involved, at least for the 8 years I've been at the Linux Foundation, so probably even more. The Linux Foundation for the last 20 years has really been the home for what I would say some of the most important open source projects. Obviously the Linux kernel, right, which is the namesake of the Linux Foundation, is hosted and managed at the Linux Foundation, but also projects like Kubernetes under the Cloud Native Computing Foundation in Cloud Native Foods. Automotive grade Linux that runs the Linux that runs on cars. We have PyTorch in the LF Data and AI Foundation. So when projects mature and go to market or want to build a really neutral community around, they come to the Linux Foundation. Since 2015, the Linux Foundation has had blockchain projects across the board. One of the most known is the Hyperledger and the Hyperledger projects. Today, and we'll go through the history of it, today we house hundreds of different projects that I'm sure every single person here in the audience touches, uses, and it's just fantastic to be in a place like this to talk about what Hiero is and why the contributions at the LF.
Well, look, you opened it, so I'm going to go in. This started as Hyperledger Foundation, 2015. I was there, you were there. If you didn't know, I used to work at IBM, and IBM contributed a lot of code, and that's how the Hyperledger blockchain-based foundation started. And then, since then, we have come here. Now it's LFDT. Can you share a little bit of more background about what is LFDT and what is the mission of it and the likes?
So LFDT, it means Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. So LF Decentralized Trust is an umbrella of open source projects that includes all the blockchain projects that have been at the Linux Foundation since 2015, projects like Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Besu, or now known as Besu, which is an EVM. A lot of people think about blockchain at the Linux Foundation to be permissioned, and we've always said there is going to be a need for public, there's going to continue to be a need for private and hybrid solutions as well. So if you look across all our project portfolios, and Hiero is the newest project that we have, you'll see that it's about building open source communities and ecosystems that allow enterprise developers to come into those developer communities and contribute and use and build upon the code bases that we have and host.
So look, Hedera has been open source for a while, but they acknowledge that this open source needs to bring in a bigger community and more open for everyone to contribute and as well as be part of the governance system. That's why I think the relationship with Linux Foundation actually worked. Now the code is already contributed. It's under the project Hiero, right? So can you talk a little bit more about Linux Foundation's governance process? Sure. How can people get involved? What does it offer to the community?
Sure. So, open source and open development and open governance is quite different, right? So open source, we encourage everybody to open source their code, put it on their GitHubs, make issues open, right? Allow people to see the code, use the code, and get involved in the code as well. When you start thinking about what LF Decentralized Trust as a neutral foundation does, is that we make sure from a governance perspective that the code projects are open source and everybody can see it, everybody can use it, but that everyone can also understand how to contribute to it. So, and how to ultimately even become maintainers of these code bases if this code is critical to the businesses and products and services that you're building. We see governments have maintainers and contributors in our projects. Why is that? Because they're building digital public infrastructure using those code projects. So when the Hedera ecosystem and the Hedera Foundation wanted to truly open source the code base, which is now known as Hiero, the Linux Foundation certainly was the first place I think that you looked at as well. So
look, Hiero as a project today has 40 million lines of code, right, that Hedera contributed. Now, Hiero is very different from Hedera. Hiero is the code base and is open for everyone to contribute and as well as download and do what they want with it. Hedera,
they could build their own Hedera network.
there you go. Actually, I know a couple of universities that are now experimenting with building a private version of Hedera because it's useful for their use case. So that's definitely one of the possibilities. Hedera is the runtime instantiation of this code. In order to make it more secure, we do some instrumentation to the Hiero code base, but it's one and the same in the sense that it's the runtime implementation of Hiero. And what this offers an opportunity is for the community to come in, see if there is a gap in the code base, step up, fill the gap, or contribute your own that is completely new and build something new on top of it.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the collaboration I have with the colleagues at the Linux Foundation. One of the things in my involvement with the foundation is interaction with the other members. Recently, I was at the Interoperability Summit for Financial Services, where Hedera was one of the participants. So was Solana, so was a number of other organizations, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's important, right? So the power of the Linux Foundation in convening companies. I tell this story all the time. Like, one of my most favorite things is when we are in a workshop or in a different, kind of a workshop or meeting, and you have two competitors, maybe at the biggest banks or maybe at the biggest insurance companies, and they're working together to try to figure out a problem, how to solve a technical problem in a code base that they need. And I've been in the room when they've looked at each other and said, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with our biggest competitor. But if we work on these things together in the open, collaboratively, and transparency, then we can all benefit from these interactions. And those are big banks. And you see small companies, you see individual contributors come in and say, I found this bug, or this, what if you do this differently? And everybody has a chance to contribute to the code base just by showing up. We tell people, show up at a meeting. Hiero, for example, the technical steering committee, from a governance perspective, the Hiero maintainers run the technical steering committee. They're voted into the technical steering committee based on the governance of that project themselves, in this case, a Hiero. You can show up and start contributing, and you can say, my goal is to be a maintainer of Hiero, and I want to do that as a company, maybe that is building products and services in the Hedera ever-growing ecosystem, right? We need commercial offerings of vendors who understand the Hiero code base 100% of the time. And so when the big banks or the big pharmaceutical companies or the consumer product companies come to me and they say, Daniela, who do I go work with if I want to build something on the Hedera network? And we have a fantastic, large ecosystem. And that is how open source becomes critical in enterprise adoption.
Look, I've personally seen this happen in my previous life at IBM with Hyperledger Fabric, and now I want to see it happen with Hiero. Yeah. This room is full of builders and a lot of code contributors. So, Daniela, from your perspective, can you share how can someone become a code contributor, maintainer, or participate in the open governance system?
Yeah, so a couple of things. You're here at HederaCon. There's a booth, a Hiero booth, over in the expo session. Go over there and speak. We have maintainers who are maintaining the code that you can talk to. We have our new community architect for Hiero, Jessica who's waving over there, go talk to her and say, I want to show up at a meetup. I want to go to a workshop. How do I see these tutorials? How do I get involved in the community? We are a virtual global community. We have people all around the world who would help you enter the community. Everything, if you go to LF Decentralized Trust, or you go to the Hiero landing page for the project, you will find a way to join the Discord, for example. We have a very active Discord channels, and you go in there and you see what people are talking about, and if you have knowledge and you know things, and even if you don't, if you have questions, you go in there and ask. It's open, anyone can do it. Come to the meetings. There's a calendar on our website that tells you exactly how to do it. And very importantly, and one of the things I want to tell this audience, and I've been talking to a lot of people today, is we need the stories, right? The way that you build an active, growing ecosystem of developers is that they see things that people are building, that it's going to make their lives easier, right? That they're going to build into the next billion-dollar business. Tell your stories. We're here to tell, to have people tell their stories of how they're building using Hiero and all the other projects at the Linux Foundation, because it helps developers. It inspires people to show up and say, you know what? So like the work that Hedera does with Guardian, right? That inspires people to come and work in the ecosystem because they're so interested in the carbon and the climate action aspect of it. So those are the kind of things, and Hedera has been doing a fantastic job over the many, many years in growing that community of developers as well. So join. You're passionate about something? Find where in the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust ecosystem the work is happening.
Now, one of the things I know Charles here may touch on it later today, Charles Atkins from our foundation, is we want to encourage more developer contributions, and he's specifically going to focus on some developer grants to help the community kind of bridge the gap, the toolkit or examples or things that they find valuable on top of the Hedera platform to give back to the community. Look, we got 2.5 minutes, and I want to touch a really important topic.
Yep.
I know Hedera is a very good and self-sufficient ecosystem, but I want to be realistic. LFTT houses all other projects, especially a key one there is Hyperledger Bezu, which is an EVM and private instance of Ethereum. Can you talk how can we collaborate and cross-develop and grow overall as a community, also the innovation in the Hedera system?
Yeah, and I think it was one of the reasons that Hedera brought in Hiero into our ecosystem. LF Decentralized Trust has 18 different projects and different ecosystems and communities, and it's really important to have that, I think, that optionality under one umbrella. Bezu that Sham mentioned came into the project in 2019. It was a contribution by Consensus, the company, who wanted to open source and openly govern the Bezu code base. Today, it's running 15% of the Ethereum mainnet as an execution client. It also is core to the Hedera as well. And there's a lot of work that's happening in the projects. So when developers come into our ecosystem, they're not just going to work in one project, right? You're able to work across projects in the interoperability projects, in the toolings of Firefly, Cacti, the interoperability projects that are in our labs. We have 50 different labs and more coming in even under the Hiero. So you don't have to be a maximalist in one platform, let's say, to actually find commonality, the plumbing pieces that should be reused across different projects, right? Whether it is in a digital identity space, for example, there's some work that's happening right now with some Akapai plugins into the Hedera ecosystem. All that work is happening under LFDT, and people bring their code, and people bring their developers in because they want to be able to collaborate in that neutral environment where they know how to do it. It's very open and transparent. How do I get this done? You show up, the community helps you. Our staff is there. We have a very small staff, but we're there to make sure that the process, the governance, and very importantly, the tools to make those developers successful, whether it's tooling, or even training and education, it's all there. And I think that's why people bring their code to the Linux Foundation and into LFDT as well.
Thank you, Daniela. That's phenomenal. I want to close with this. Look, we want your engagement, your involvement, your coming in as part of the technology steering committee or the technology architecture committee, or being a code consumer or a contributor or a maintainer. Either way, this is your ecosystem, this is your code base, and we want your involvement. So thank you, Daniela.
Yeah,
Thanks
please
for your
join
time.
us.
Yeah, thank you very much.